Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. Backstory. My pops, Rick, is an assistant principal at a high school. It's his second year now at this new school. Way better than the last dump he worked at. That place was overcrowded, full of drugs, with lots of kids on free or reduced lunches. There were brawls almost weekly, and my pops had to suspend punks daily. But his current school is a big improvement, with only 2 major incidents the whole year so far, one involving an autistic kid having a meltdown, and the crazy situation I'm about to tell y'all about. Cast: my pops Rick, Bratty Tiffany, Psycho Susan, her mom, Scumbag Mike, her brother, Skank Stacy, her sister, Mr. Hawkins the bus driver, Judge Matthews, Mr. Caldwell the lawyer for the school, that sleazeball the lawyer for Psycho Susan, Principal Garcia, and Officer Rodriguez the school cop. The details might be a bit fuzzy since this all went down a couple months back. From what I understand, it started when Mr. Hawkins, the bus driver, either accidentally bumped into Bratty Tiffany while dropping her off, or he told her off for being a mouthy brat. Either way, she texted her mom, Psycho Susan, who came storming out screaming at poor Mr. Hawkins. He just drove off to avoid her craziness. The next morning, Mr. Hawkins pulls up to pick up Bratty Tiffany, but instead of just her, Psycho Susan, Scumbag Mike, and Skank Stacy were all waiting. As soon as he opened the door to ask where Tiffany was, bam, all 3 psychos barge onto the bus. Tiffany's a junior, her brother Mike is like 22, and her sister Stacy is in college, so they're all grown adults acting insane. They start cussing out Mr. Hawkins, threatening him, hurling slurs. It was terrifying for the kids on the bus. As soon as the Psycho family got off, Mr. Hawkins floored it to get away. Here's the brilliant part those idiots missed. Every bus in the county has 4 HD cameras with audio picking up everything. It was all recorded in glorious detail. Poor Mr. Hawkins dropped the kids off at school, then headed straight to the office. My pops was furious when he saw the footage. He called in Officer Rodriguez and had Psycho Susan's rear end arrested for harassment, trespassing, intimidation, you name it. Principal Garcia gave my pops full control since he never messes around with psychos like this. So here's how my pops got revenge. First, he switched Bratty Tiffany to a different bus route so she couldn't mess with Mr. Hawkins again. Then he banned Scumbag Mike, Skank Stacy, and Psycho Susan from all school property permanently. And he gave Mr. Hawkins a paid month off to recover from the trauma. That was just the petty stuff. Working with Mr. Caldwell, the school's slick lawyer, my pops got statements from most of the kids who witnessed the attack. They decided to press charges against just Psycho Susan and Scumbag Mike. Since he was already on probation for some other crime, so jail was guaranteed. At the trial 6 weeks later, no one thought Psycho Susan would get more than maybe a week in jail at most. My pops, Principal Garcia, and Officer Rodriguez went to the courthouse just in case they needed to testify. They didn't end up having to. Mr. Caldwell laid out the case, and Psycho Susan's sleazeball lawyer just tried to reduce her sentence, knowing they would lose since the videos alone were damning evidence. But then, boom! Judge Matthews hit Psycho Susan with a 30-day sentence. He let her have it, saying she threatened a man's life, endangered kids, and trespassed at a school, all because the bus driver told off her brat daughter. My pops and Principal Garcia were trying not to cheer. But that's not even the best part. Scumbag Mike, the delinquent brother, never showed up for his trial right after his mom's. It was scheduled back-to-back, so no way he forgot. Judge Matthews immediately issued a warrant for his arrest. The next day, cops found Scumbag Mike hiding out at Psycho Susan's house and hauled him in. When Mike faced the judge for skipping court and violating probation, plus the new charges from the bus incident, Judge Matthews went nuclear and gave him a year in prison. If that's not the most glorious pro-revenge, I don't know what is. As for Bratty Tiffany, she had to switch schools after bringing so much drama. My pops can't stop cackling about the insane instant karma that family faced. If he was on Reddit, you know he'd be posting this epic tale everywhere to bask in the glory. The next one is an entitled people story. I've lived on this beautiful piece of land for over 20 years now. It's not a huge property, just a nice little 5-acre lot out in the countryside. I built a small but cozy house here after I got married, dreaming of raising my family surrounded by nature. My wife and I were thrilled when we were blessed with twin boys soon after. As they grew up, they spent countless days playing in the open fields, climbing trees, and wading in the creek behind our house. This place was a little slice of heaven, that is, until she showed up. About 2 years ago, the plot of land next to ours was purchased by this obnoxious woman who I immediately dubbed Karen in my mind. She wasted no time criticizing our messy property and noisy kids. I tried to be neighborly at first, but Karen was nothing but cold and entitled. According to her, we needed to cut down the big oak tree near the property line because some branches hung over onto her side. She also wanted us to fence off the creek because she didn't want her golden retriever swimming in muddy water. And don't even get me started on the hissy fit she threw over the treehouse my wife and I built for the boys. Apparently it was an eyesore that lowered her property value. Karen's incessant demands and complaints were annoying, but things only got worse when she started trying to encroach onto our land. She put up tacky garden gnomes right on the property line one day. A few weeks later, she extended her flower beds by a few feet, clearly onto our property, but the last straw came when I arrived home to find construction crews starting work on a road through our field. I immediately chased the confused workers away, yelling at them that they were on private property. That's when Karen strutted over with a smug look on her face. "This is happening whether you like it or not," she announced. "I need a road here to connect my property to the main street." I was fuming with anger, but somehow stayed composed. "Karen, this is our land that you are illegally trespassing and destroying. I'm only going to say this once. Get your equipment off our property now." Karen laughed derisively. "Or what? This is happening, so I suggest you get over it." I shook my head in disbelief at her audacity. But Karen had underestimated me. Without another word, I pulled out my phone and dialed cops, requesting police presence immediately. Within 15 minutes, 2 patrol cars pulled up with lights flashing. The officers listened to both sides before informing Karen that she was clearly in the wrong. "Ma'am, you can't just build a road wherever you want, especially on someone else's private property," the older officer said sternly. "Please instruct your work crew to leave immediately." Karen's confident smile morphed into a look of shock and outrage. She argued loudly with the officers, yelling about her rights and how she needed that road, but the police officers stood firm. Eventually, the construction crew packed up their gear and drove off our land. Karen was absolutely seething, but impotently watched them go, realized she had no recourse here. As the patrol cars left, I informed Karen that if she tried anything like this again, I would not only call the police, but pursue legal action as well. Over the next few weeks, I kept a close eye out for any suspicious activity from my disgruntled neighbor. Karen mostly kept to herself, probably trying to figure out her next move. That's why her silence should have been a red flag. One morning, I woke up to the rumbling of heavy machinery. I rushed outside to see construction crews back on my property, actively building Karen's illegal road. This time, I immediately called my lawyer along with the police. Both arrived promptly. My lawyer presented the construction foreman with a cease and desist letter, threatening major legal consequences if they continued this unlawful project. Once the police reiterated that Karen did not have rights to build here, the work crew reluctantly packed up again. I wish I could say that was the end of it, but Karen seemed obsessed with her precious road. Over the next few weeks, surveyors kept showing up, dumping flags and markers on our property without permission. It was blatant harassment at this point. That's when I decided to hit Karen where it really hurt, in the wallet. On my lawyer's advice, I took her to court for illegally trespassing and attempting to steal land. The look on Karen's face when she was served her court summons was utterly priceless. At the hearing, the judge listened to both sides patiently, but Karen didn't have a legal leg to stand on. Not only did she clearly try to steal our land, but I also produced evidence of her other obnoxious behaviors over the past 2 years. The judge ultimately ruled fully in my favor, hitting Karen with massive fines, legal fees, and a restraining order, preventing her from setting foot on my property ever again. She also had to remove those tacky garden gnomes permanently. Karen left the courthouse absolutely fuming, but with her metaphorical tail between her legs. I doubt she'll be trying anything else anytime soon. My wife and I celebrated that evening with the boys, relieved to finally have this nasty situation behind us, and I learned an important lesson. Don't mess with a mama bear protecting her land and family. The next one is a petty revenge story. My dad, 57M, started dating Becky, 25F, 4 months ago. For reference, I'm a 26-year-old and my dad and mom, to note she is 54, divorced when I was 24, 2 years ago, and this is his first relationship, to my knowledge, since mom and dad separated. My dad has become the proverbial rich man dating young bimbo upgrade douchebag, and it's made my mom feel like yesterday's trash. Him and Becky have such an obvious transactional relationship that it's been making me question how he sees women. Like what? Was he checking out my friends growing up? Is that something I have to worry about now? Duck you! I've tried expressing to him that their relationship makes me uncomfortable for every obvious ducking reason, but he won't listen, and I'm tired of his blatant disrespect and dismissal of my feelings. So, if he sees no issue with it, then I guess neither do. This weekend was Becky's birthday, and my dad threw a massive garden party for it with her bimbo friends, plus his friends and his business partners, all I'm sure, so he could try and get his creepy buddies set up with her gold-digging friends. But you know what? Since that was the vibe, why wouldn't I join in on the fun? So what did I do? I found myself an older man and decided to bring him as my plus one. How old is he? He's 62, so let's just call him Old Joe. Only fitting if his girlfriend is younger than me. That my new boyfriend be older than him. So the party starts, I'm on my best behavior with him and all his friends, acting like I support it all when I leave to get my new guy because he just arrived. It was honestly art coming back up to him and all his friends sitting together at the main table, the birthday girl basically hanging all over him, to introduce them all to my old-ass boyfriend. Wish I took a photo of their faces. What's wrong, Dad? You don't look so good. Becky, you should get his heart medication. This party might be too taxing on him. And then I sat on Old Joe's lap. I made sure to be as shameless as his new girlfriend, and yes, I felt disgusting doing it. But it was ducking worth it to watch my dad basically throw Becky off of him, which ruined her special day. I cannot express how satisfying it was to watch him fume from across the table. But what was he going to say? And the best part? One of his partners knew Old Joe. They were golf buddies. Ha ha ha. And before he could say anything to me, I made my exit with Old Joe because he was taking me on a private boat ride and we didn't want to miss our port departure. And now he's calling me non-stop and I just keep sending him to voicemail. Though I did text him about what ED medication he takes so I could recommend the brand to Old Joe. At this point, I don't care how this affects our relationship because I am disgusted with him and his choices. I am satisfied with the payback and I hope he likes the taste of his own medicine. The next one is a malicious compliance story. About 5 or 6 years ago, I built a fence in my backyard. I talked to my neighbors and we decided on a good place to build the fence. We knew an approximate property line based on some survey pins, but we're both too cheap to pay for a surveyor. We shook hands and I built the fence. It was a great deal for my neighbors. I paid for everything, built the fence, and all they had to do was give me a thumbs up when it was done. Then, a year later, they sold their house. That meant I got a new neighbor, more specifically, I got Ann. Ann was from the big city. Ann was a realtor. Ann had flipped 8 houses in 12 years. Ann loved this new house and planned on staying for a long time, and Ann had a dog. Razzie was a German Shepherd mix that spent most of the day outside while Ann went to work. Razzie was aggressive towards children, animals, insects, and any plants that waved in the breeze. Razzie also, as Ann once told me, loved to chew on furniture. That's why Razzie stayed outside so much. About 6 months after Ann moved in, I saw a surveyor walking around in my neighborhood, and he was paying special attention to my backyard. The next day, Ann showed up at my front door with a stack of papers and asked me if I was going to pay her for the 9 inches that my fence was encroaching onto her property. I explained the handshake deal with the last neighbors, but she was having no part of it. She wanted the fence moved or she wanted money, no discussions. She had spoken to her lawyer friend and was perfectly happy to take me to court over the fence. She told me, "I don't know how you guys do it out here in the sticks, but where I come from, we follow the rules." So I got rid of the fence. The next day, I unscrewed the horizontal rails from the brackets, stacked the fence panels up against my garage, and pulled up the fence posts with my work van. About a week later, Ann shows up at my front door again. She wants to know when I'm going to be building a new fence. Turns out, without my portion of the fence, she has not been able to let Razzie out unattended for fear that he will run away, attack something, or get hit by a car. She also told me she can't keep him in the house all day while she's at work anymore. Her furniture and carpet are all but ruined. I told her, "Well, Ann, I'm not going to be rebuilding the fence. I don't want any legal trouble, and the best way to stay out of trouble is to not build near your property." The look on her face was priceless. I thought she was going to cry. She probably did when she got back home. She tried to protest, saying that she really needed the fence back and she would even help pay for the new one. She told me how much she loved the style and aesthetic of the old one. It was just the location that she had a problem with. I stood firm. There would be no new fence. She never got a fence. She made half-hearted attempts to put up some bamboo fencing, but Razzie tore through that stuff like wet newspaper. Eventually, I sold my place and moved away. I took the old fence panels with me and I still look at them every day when I let my dog out in the morning. The next one is an entitled people's story. I was flying from Fort Lauderdale to Jacksonville about 20-ish years ago. Any quotes I make are a reasonable facsimile of what was actually said 20-some-odd years ago. Your mileage may vary. Batteries not included. See dealership for details. Small regional airline. Puddle jumper plane. Single seats down one side, double seats down the other. This was back before airlines charged you for the audacity of desiring to breathe while in their tin cans, and since I was booking pretty far ahead of time, I was able to select a seat on the left side, single seats, of the aircraft. Now, being 6'4" and having flown numerous times, I know that the exit row is the primo seat unless you're paying for first business class. And I also know that arriving early and asking politely at check-in more often than not gets you that sweet extra legroom as long as it's available. So I show up a couple hours early, unfamiliar airport, and this was shortly post 9/11, so security was a much longer process to get through. Go to check-in counter, ask the nice lady if there was any chance of getting the exit row, and sure enough, polite one again. And doubly so, because I not only got the exit row, but I also got to stay on the same side of the plane, which means no one to bump elbows with. Jackpot. Make my way down to the gate, and soon enough, it's time to board our flight. Pre-boarding passengers first, then the rest of us cattle. Single-class cabin, so pre-boarding was supposedly only for those needing extra time. I make my way down to my prize, only to find someone is sitting in it. I'm annoyed, but not overly so. Could just be an honest mistake. Sir, I'm sorry, but I think you might be in my seat. And show him my boarding pass. Duck you! Not exactly the reply I was expecting. Except it came out more like, fuck's huge. Ah, so not only belligerent, but drunk and belligerent. Well, I know the rules. And drunk enough to slur speech means no exit row for you. Catch the attention of a FA and talk to her quietly about the situation and my concern regarding Mr. Drunk and Belligerent in the exit row. Never mind that it's my exit row seat, damn it. She approaches the gentleman, but barely gets a word out before receiving an even louder "Fushu!" I know what's coming next. Sure enough, she heads off to the front of the plane. Mr. D&B smiles smugly, thinking he's won. Meanwhile, I'm grinning like the Cheshire Cat because I know what the next act is. Sure enough, here comes the captain with the FA in tow. Now this gentleman is big. He's got at least 2 inches on me height-wise, and I suspect if he ever gets bored with being a pilot, he could play defensive back. Clearly the kind of person who gets out pent-up energy by picking up and putting down very heavy things repeatedly. Sir, what's the issue? Now Mr. D&B has figured out that the man standing in front of him is some kind of authority figure, but he doesn't quite seem to be able to pin down what kind of authority figure. But in a slightly less drunk corner of his mind, he knows uniform, and he knows big. So instead of a repeat of what the FA and I got, the captain gets some drunken warbling about it being his seat, and that I was mean, or something, because I wanted to take it away from him, and that the lady over there, as he points about 2 feet to the left of her, was mean too, or something. The captain, meanwhile, takes one look at the FA, then back at Mr. D&B. Sir, have you been drinking? 2 beers! As an aside, I really want to see these mystical 2 beers sometime. I imagine they mean kegs, 2 kegs of beer, but I digress. Captain tries to be polite. Sir, could I see your boarding pass? Captain knows that this flight is full, so doubtful he can get this guy into any kind of a decent seat, like a bulkhead seat, to try to bribe him. But he wants to know where this guy is actually supposed to be. Sir, your seat is back there, as he points to an empty seat in the very back of the plane. Just forward of the galley and lavatories, not a primo seat. No-ish not. Dish my sheet. With a sigh, the captain turns to me. Sir, could I see your boarding pass? Back to Mr. D&B. Sir, this seat belongs to the gentleman standing here. Please get your belongings and move to your assigned seat. That slightly less drunk part of his brain lost hold of its grip on his mouth. The 2 beers bellowed out, No, dish my sheets, fush calls you. I'll be honest, the captain was not expecting this, and then I see a vein throbbing on the captain's forehead that could have doubled as a garden hose. He pointed at me. Sir, please come with me, spun on his heel and walked toward the front of the plane. At this point, he just wants to separate Mr. D&B from those he thinks are mean. Once we're out of his earshot, he looks at the FA and asks her to call the airport police to escort the gentleman off the aircraft. I glance back, and Mr. D&B is smiling smugly again, thinking he's somehow won. That smile lasted about 7 more minutes, until the local gendarmes arrived to inform Mr. D&B that he can either walk off the plane under his own power, or he could be cuffed and assisted off the plane. I will credit the cops, they had much more patience than I had. About 5 minutes of drunken whinging about everyone being mean and it being his sheet. Eventually, they too lost patience, and then the silver bracelets came out and off they went, with our drunk friend now protesting loudly that the cops were mean. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.